To pick up from the last class of what we talked about in terms of top-down versus bottom-up processing. I had you guys pause and go ahead and hopefully you guys watched the YouTube video on that, and there was some really good information there, so we're just going to kind of pick right back up where we left off. So what I'd like for you to do in a few of these slides is to put your, if you're not watching this, if you're listening to this, and if you want to follow along, you can bring up your PowerPoint and you can look at it in slideshow mode, or you can just follow along with this video. Either one is fine. But I have instructions in the slideshow if you're not watching the video simultaneously. So what we have here, for example, is an optical illusion, and the question is do you see something here? Do you see a random array of shapes, or do you actually see something that is meaningful to you? And so if you look at this and you see a cube, okay, so if you're actually seeing the cube here, then the question is are there actual lines here? And I mean, of course, I've drawn them in so you guys can kind of see it pop out of the black dots, but there are no lines there. The image stops here. If you look, it stops there, and there's no actual lines to make this a cube. But we perceive the lines and finish this into a cube because of the way that our brains work. And so we're going to get into what this is, this sort of Gestalt principle. We're going to talk about law of closure and things like that, of why it is that we actually see things that and perceive things that really aren't there. We're going to get into all of that later. But what I want to really talk about here is this bottom up or is this top down processing? So what we have here is an argument for bottom up that says, well, we're going to process all these tiny little shapes and these little pieces together, and then we're going to put that into something that we know, right? So that's an argument for bottom up, is there's all these tiny little pieces, we put them all together, and then we arrange it into a shape that we are familiar with. We can also argue that it's top-down processing because we're already familiar with shapes like cubes. And then we're going to fill these lines in here based on our expectation of what a cube looks like. And that is using top-down processing. Our expectation is it's a shape, it's a cube, and then we fill it in terms of perceptual and sensational processes in between there. What's really happening is the intersection or the interaction between the two things. And that is both bottom-up and top-down processing are occurring. And we're going to talk more about this interaction later on, but just to kind of give you a feel of what's going on. So, like I said, I have instructions here for you guys. If you're using a PowerPoint, you can use the little slideshow feature here. And what that's going to do is just going to make it so it's like a presentation mode so you can see the different slides as full screen. And so this is kind of fun to do. It's just like a little experiment. So I'm going to give you some instructions. The next slide, what I want you to do is I want you to close your eyes, and then I'm going to flip to the next slide, and I'm going to say open and shut your eyes, and you're going to do that really quickly, and you're just going to expose the picture in the next slide. So I'm going to kind of walk you through this in the video. If you're not doing the video, you're just doing slideshow, then you'll follow these instructions on your own, okay? Once you open your eyes, I want you to think about what is the picture that I just saw? What does it look like, okay? So I'm going to move to the next slide, okay? And I'm going to tell you to close your eyes, okay, when to, and then I'm going to tell you to open, close, and then I want you to follow those instructions, okay? So what you're going to do here, you're going to look at this, okay? I want you to just take a look at it, and then I'm going to have you close your eyes, and then I'm going to move to the next slide, and I'm going to say open, shut. And then I want you to then think about what that picture looks like, okay? So go ahead and look at the picture, close your eyes, keep them closed, open, shut. What is it that you see? Now open your eyes, and I want you to determine what is it that you are looking at. Do you see a rat or do you see a man? Okay, so I can actually prime you to see one over the other. So this was the original picture. That is sort of the base picture, okay? And you can either see a rat. So here's the head and the whiskers. Here's the ears, okay? That's the body and the tail and the legs. Okay, these are legs. So that's like a rat. It's like it's got a little smile here, okay? Or, let's see if I can, it's not going to let me clear this. Hold on. PowerPoint usually does, when I'm in this mode, it sometimes doesn't let me do certain things. Here, let's clear it, okay? So that was the rat. So the man would be, here are the glasses. So this is the guy's glasses. Here's his nose, okay? And then here's his ear. Here's his mouth, okay, right here. So you have a mouth here, okay? And here's his bald head, all right? So that would be the man. And then this is the rest of his face, okay? Now, the picture that I showed you looks more like a rat than a man, right? Okay. This right here can actually prime you to see one over the other. So if I give you this picture versus another picture, I can give you, I can kind of predict the likelihood if you're going to be more likely to see a rat or a man. And so you can argue, for example, here, this demonstration here, if we give you a more rat-like picture, you're probably going to see a rat here. If I give you a more man-like picture, you're going to be more likely to see a rat here. So what did you see and what do you think I primed you for? Okay, so this is the picture that I showed you, and then this was the picture that I said, what do you see? And I want you to actually write this in you're going to have a participation journal, okay? And I want you to think about, did you see a rat or did you see a man? Do you think you were primed with more rat-like features or were you primed with a picture with more man-like features, okay? So I'm going to have you guys write this up. In this experiment, when people are exposed to a certain kind of image, okay, it can predict the likelihood of what they perceive, all right? So here, for example, is an experiment where this was done back in the 60s, okay? There was a control group that was shown no pictures beforehand, and then there was a group that was seen a more animal group, and then a group that saw more face-like groups, okay? So the more pictures of animals that the people saw, the more likely they would see a rat, okay, than the man. So if the person was exposed to 4 animal pictures prior to seeing the ambiguous in-between picture, which is what we talked about right here, this sort of in-between, okay? Then, if they saw 4 animals prior to it, 100% of the time, that group saw a rat. If they saw faces, they were much more likely to observe a man over the rat. Okay? So about 73 to 80% saw a man rather than a rat when exposed to these face pictures prior to seeing the ambiguous image. So we can actually prime people to see certain things based on their perception, based on what they have been exposed to prior to. So this would be an example of using top-down processes because we have primed you with knowledge and experience for an expectation. So if I give you 4 animal groups, your expectation is that the next ambiguous picture is going to be more likely to be an animal, and you're going to recognize it as a rat over a man. So when we talk about top-down, bottom-up, perception is really determined by that interaction between bottom-up processing, which starts with the receptors. It starts with the sensation. It starts with all those physiological mechanisms. And it interacts with the top-down processing, which is you bringing your knowledge into play. So for this example, this image of a moth right here on a tree, we see that it initiates bottom-up processing because that right there, this image is going to project onto the back of the woman's retina, and that is bottom-up processing. All the little tiny pieces is going to process, into her cells. And then the second part is understanding what you're looking at. It's the prior knowledge of moths and bringing that to the situation and to what you perceive. And so the way that we understand the things around us is an interaction between what we know, what we bring to the table, and what we physically see in that physiological process of, in the case of vision, images projected to the retina, and then that message being sent to the brain. If you have any questions about this process, let me know. I'm going to end the video here, and then we're going to talk about the perceptual process next.